This is in November of 1968 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Prabhupada had been there a day, and then he's going to go to Los Angeles next. And I just read, Govinda Dasi will always be sick. She will be sick in heaven. Prabhupada began laughing, but Toshan only looked back nervously. So they think Swamiji will come here and die. Prabhupada gestured towards the window. There are so many people living here. And this is Toshan Krishna speaking. He's a very new devotee. He's still there down in Florida, I think. A lot of the devotees are down in Florida. Toshan Krishna speaking. It became cold in the morning, so he told he told me to turn all the burners on the stove. He rubbed his head and started singing the prayers to his spiritual master. He half sang, half said them, and when he was done, we both chanted japa together. I knew I was very fortunate. Then he had me do little things like turn off the burners on the stove. Now you can turn one off. Now you can turn another one off. It was getting warmer. Later we went for an early morning walk. I had nothing to ask Prabhupada since I knew so little of the philosophy. He was telling me that one's fortunate life begins when he meets a devotee. I read this. Yeah, I read it again. That night, about 40 guests came to the temple, a big increase over the usual attendance. The audience was almost entirely young couples, and Prabhupada talked about Radha and Krishna in a way that seemed most fitting. Radharani is the most beautiful girl, he said, and Krishna is the most beautiful boy. He explained that Radha and Krishna are the perfection of the conjugal relationship. And when that same conjugal relationship is exhibited by the conditioned souls in the material world, it is only a perverted reflection. After the lecture, as Prabhupada spoke casually with the guests, an elderly woman introduced herself as head of the Albuquerque Yoga Club and invited Prabhupada to come there to speak. Prabhupada said that he would be happy to come, and turning to Harinam said, "We should go. They have invited me." "But they already have another engagement for you in Los Angeles," Harinam replied. So Prabhupada ended his short stay in Santa Fe after only one day. Yeah, in the material world, you get a new boyfriend or girlfriend, and everyone's really excited when they have a new relationship, and there's a little bit of happiness there. There's some happiness there. You feel excited and some love and dedication, but and the happiness there is called a perverted reflection of Radharani and Krishna's perfection of conjugal relationship. And whatever we think, whatever we experience here, there is some excitement and some happiness, but it's nothing compared to the happiness between Radharani and Krishna, and any devotee who takes part in their pastimes, but in a service way, by making garlands and cooking for them and cleaning for Radharani and Krishna, and you can experience the highest happiness that doesn't end after a few weeks or a few months or a few years or even a lifetime. Sometimes husband and wife stay together, but then it ends, and then there's nothing left, but the Radharani and Krishna's relationship is eternal, and it's unlimited ecstasy and bliss. And it says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that the gopis are always trying to make arrangements for Radharani and Krishna to meet, and Radharani is always trying to make arrangements for the gopis to meet. And he even says, meet with Krishna. And it even says that the pleasure experienced by the gopis when they make arrangements for Radharani and Krishna to meet is 10 million times greater than just the pleasure of Radharani, which is incomprehensible, of course. But everything in Krishna's relationships with Radharani and all his devotees is incomprehensible from the material platform. We try to analyze and categorize and put everything in its order according to logic and reason or mundane calculations in the material world. And you can do that in the material world. Well, I should love or reciprocate with this person so much because they reciprocated with me so much, so I'll return it in kind. Or it's always the case in material relationships, but and it's very limited. The reciprocation and happiness we get is very small compared to the unlimited bliss of Krishna's relationship with all his devotees. So we're doing that now. We're chanting Hare Krishna. We're glorifying Radharani and Krishna's pastimes together. We're doing all our services for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the combined form of Radharani and Krishna. So in the preaching and to spread Krishna consciousness is directly taking part in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya as Radha Krishna combined. So in our small way, just by doing whatever little service we're doing in ISKCON, in the service to Prabhupada, to our spiritual master, we're taking direct part in the Leela of Radha Krishna. That's not, we don't experience it so much now because we're still in a dull state of consciousness and very covered over. But it's all there waiting for us as time goes on, as our maturity and devotional service goes on. Everything is waiting for us and will be revealed to us gradually. Ultimately, pure love of Krishna. And that's not static either, but pure love of Krishna is always increasing. Also, it's Anandam Buddhivardhanam, the ocean of love of God that's always increasing. The material ocean, it doesn't increase. It's very big, but it doesn't get bigger unless Antarctica melts and falls into the ocean, then it'll get bigger. But under normal circumstances, in our general experience, is that the ocean doesn't increase, but the ocean of love of God is not only infinite, but it's always increasing eternally and unlimitedly. These are pretty big claims, and but Krishna is a pretty big person, and devotional service to Krishna is the ultimate goal of life. So I'm going to start chapter 6 in this book. The title is 108 Rose Bushes. October 28th, 1968. On returning to Los Angeles from Santa Fe, Prabhupada found his followers in their new location on Hollywood Boulevard in the tourist section, a block from Grauman's Chinese Theater. It's a big Hollywood landmark. The new temple, a former beauty parlor, occupied the large first floor of an elegant old 6-story office building. The space, actually tri-level with a ground floor, a mezzanine, and a basement, was filled with more than 40 devotees. And this was 1968, so it couldn't have been any more than a year, probably less than a year, since Nandarani and what was her husband's name? I forget his name right now, but a married couple. They moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles and started the Los Angeles temple. And the first Los Angeles temple was just their apartment. And Prabhupada stayed with them for a while, and they had a daughter named Chandramukhi, who I knew, and I don't know where she is now, but I knew her for a while about 20 years ago. And she told us that when she was a baby or a little kid in the apartment, and Prabhupada stayed with them, they had an altar, and they had Jagannath deities on the altar. And she said she used to go on the altar and play with the Jagannath deities, and Prabhupada used to laugh when she did that. But now, probably less than a year later, they had a 3-level building right in the center of Hollywood, and they had 40 devotees in the temple. Krishna consciousness was expanding very rapidly. It still is expanding very rapidly, but those were the early days, and so it's a very special time in the history of ISKCON. Prabhupada stayed in the Lucky 7 Motel across the street. In the early evening, before the devotees would go out again to chant, they would crowd into Prabhupada's room and sit with him. Prabhupada had ordered that in every center his disciples perform public kirtan, and that order was sending the devotees in New York, Boston, and San Francisco to the parks. In Los Angeles, the devotees were going out 12 hours a day chanting Hare Krishna in Hollywood. And that wasn't sitting down on a rug. That was standing up the whole time, clapping their hands and dancing and playing kartals and mridungas and the arms in the air. I don't know if they were doing it the whole 12, but that was what Harinam was and still is in many places. But that was the only way Harinam outside kirtan was done back then. One devotee I know in Gitanagari, he was in Pittsburgh ISKCON and New Vrindavan ISKCON very early, and he said the term for going out chanting on the street back then was street sankirtan. Let's go out on street sankirtan. Prabhupada had simply, and so they were chanting in Hollywood, and Hollywood is a big tourist place in California, and so there must have been thousands, hundreds of thousands of people seeing them every day, out for 12 hours a day. Prabhupada had simply asked that they go out and chant, but enthusiastic new leaders, Tamal Krishna and Vishnu Jana, were taking that order to the fullest extent. One night, Prabhupada came out in a car and parked in front of the kirtan party, watching the chanting and dancing with pleasure. Vishnu Jana, who had become especially expert on the mridanga, played and led the chanting. The boys wore clean uniform, saffron dhotis, and the women saffron saris. Tamal Krishna had organized the devotees almost to the point of choreography, and Prabhupada watched as the devotees raised their hands and danced back and forth in the Swami step, which he himself had taught. Hundreds of tourists walked along Hollywood and Vine, going to the theaters, the wax museum, the CD bars, and the nightclubs. And although sometimes they laughed or made fun of the chanters, they were more often astonished, and at least for a moment, as they stopped in their tracks, delighted. But to Prabhupada, sitting quietly in the car, watching the devotees, the chanting was a benediction on the sleeping souls passing by. He was convinced that everyone on Hollywood Boulevard who heard the chanting was becoming purified of lifetimes of sinful activity. This was the power of the holy name. And the youthful disciples on the street, energetically singing to Vishnu Jana's beat, were also aware of this. Seeing Srila Prabhupada's car and knowing that he was watching renewed their enthusiasm. I remember seeing the devotees out on Harinam the first time in the summer of 1970 on Boylston Street. And it was just like this. It was about 40 devotees out there chanting and dancing and jumping up and down, and some of the ladies going around selling incense and distributing Prabhupada's books. And there was a big crowd around, like 100 people around, standing right on Boylston Street on a Saturday night in the summer. And almost everybody liked it. There was, or at least curious. There was one guy there, this middle-aged guy, and he was standing there, leaning against, just standing there with his arms folded across his chest, looking on in displeasure, let us say. And after a while there, when the kirtan stopped for a little while, he gave the traditional objection to the devotees. Why don't you get a job? And of course, at that time, nowadays, almost all the devotees do have jobs. You might see doctors out there and lawyers and accountants and all kinds of devotees out there. Most of the devotees have jobs. But at this time, hardly any of the devotees did have jobs. But that's the traditional objection from the envious person towards the devotees, is that they think you're just parasites on society. You're not contributing anything useful to society. You're just worshiping God. You're just singing and dancing on the street. Why don't you get a job and contribute to society? And they don't know that the devotees are making the best contribution to society by spreading the holy name and freeing people from the cycle of birth and death. To Prabhupada, this kirtan party was only happening by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's blessings. Surely he would be pleased to see this revolutionary phenomenon, the holy name resounding from young American Vaishnavas in the late night of this sinful city. Every city is a very sinful city, definitely. And as Prabhupada was convinced of the blessings of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, so his young followers, knowing their spiritual master was watching them, were similarly convinced by him, and they transcended all fatigue and doubt. They must have been really tired when they got back to the temple after 12 hours out on Sankirtan. I'm sure they slept very well at night. There's one place where Prabhupada says that Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men, they worked very hard during the day and they slept very soundly at night. They work very hardly any of the devotees have trouble going to sleep at night. They've been up serving, chanting, and doing all kinds of things for Krishna all day. When you lay down, even if you're laying down just on the floor on a sleeping bag, when I laid down on the floor at night after a day's service, it felt like you're jumping into the softest bed you could imagine. And if you're used to it, we were used to it. Now I'm not used to it. And yeah, and it worked very hard for Krishna during the day, and you sleep very soundly at night. The devotees' residence on Hollywood Boulevard was short-lived. Their public chanting had already made them a sensation, and the arrival of the Jagannath deities there was more than the landlord had bargained for. The other tenants of the building were also disturbed, especially whenever the air conditioning system would pick up the aroma of the chili spiced dal and circulate the fumes throughout the building, causing office workers to gasp and cough. The landlord served an eviction notice. He would return the devotees $450 on the condition that they move themselves and all their belongings from the building that same day. Evicting someone back then was a lot easier than it is evicting someone now. You have to go through a long process, but he wanted them out the same day. And only if they left the same day would they get their deposit back, their rent. The devotees had no choice. They put everything, stove, furniture, rugs, pots and pans, soap, split peas, even Lord Jagannath out on the sidewalk. They had nowhere to go. While the women and children waited for hours amid the paraphernalia on the street, some other devotees managed to rent enough warehouse space for the furniture. Gradually, the devotees relocated in various places. An elderly English lady allowed a few devotees to stay at her house. The brahmacharis found a small house in the Watts area, and a few women went to another place. Dayananda, who had a job, that was his original devotee's name, Dayananda, who had a job in his own apartment, took a few married couples at his place and found an apartment for Prabhupada, Lord Jagannath, and Kartamishana on Hayworth Street. Thus, the devotees of the Los Angeles temple became scattered. Despite the odd circumstances, they still came together every day for chanting, either on Hollywood Boulevard or in some other Los Angeles area. Prabhupada began visiting the brahmacharis at their house, where he held regular Monday, Wednesday, and Friday lectures. He would lead kirtan, often masterfully playing the mridanga, and his playing would make everyone dance. Nandarani had arranged for Prabhupada to lecture at the Hollywood Vegetarian Society. Do they want to hear about Bhagavad Gita? Prabhupada asked. No, Nandarani replied. They only want to hear about being vegetarian. You tell them Swamiji doesn't know anything about being vegetarian. Tell them I don't know anything. But if they want to learn about Bhagavad Gita, I know something. Nandarani called the Vegetarian Society and asked if they wanted to hear about Bhagavad Gita. They didn't. Prabhupada said, and we aren't interested in lecturing at mundane programs. Even the pigeons are vegetarians. We don't want to be pigeons. We don't care for vegetarian or non-vegetarian. We only care if we can offer it to Krishna. Then we will eat it. And of course, Krishna does ask for vegetarian food. offer me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water, and I will accept it. And yeah, Prabhupada said, we're not vegetarians, we're prasaditarians. If Krishna asked for meat, he said we would offer Krishna meat. He doesn't ask. Yeah. Yeah. I guess there wasn't much bridge preaching back then, although he was going to go to the yoga society and preach. At least they would listen to something, listen to him speak. And if he went to the yoga society, he wouldn't have beat around the bush talking about anything other. He would have given the same lecture to them almost the same lecture that he gave in the temple to all the devotees. You can hear Prabhupada's speeches in various circumstances, definitely in India, where he would be invited to some Rotary Club meeting or some association of some kind of association, but he gave the same very direct Krishna conscious lectures from the Bhagavad Gita as he gave in the temple to all the devotees. Yeah, it's a chance to preach, and if you just sort of a little of this, a little of that, quote a couple verses from the Bhagavad Gita maybe, and a little of this. It's very kind of wimpy, not very, and it doesn't carry the same. It doesn't carry the same force and potency of just direct preaching. Of course, you adjust a little bit according to the nature, the group that you're preaching to, but not very much. You don't have to, like, get into it and make all kinds of adjustments and equivocations or anything. You just preach straight. That's what everybody needs to hear. And you can go anywhere and hear about vegetarianism or yoga or how to have a better self-image or how to do better in business and go anywhere for that. But there's only one place one group of people that you can hear from that will tell you about going back home, back to Godhead. Yeah. When a reporter from the Cosmic Star came, probably some kind of hippie paper, I'm not sure, but Cosmic Star, it sounds like hippie type thing. Prabhupada talked frankly with him about bogus swamis and avatars from India. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times interviewed Prabhupada on whether he thought man could land on the moon. That was always a question back then because the reporters and even devotees sometimes would ask about, because we were all convinced that we had landed on the moon. And Prabhupada said we didn't land on the moon. And so that was always something the reporters brought up. They're looking for some kind of controversy, some kind of discrepancy. Prabhupada told the reporter to note down that the Krishna consciousness movement has nothing to do with going to the moon. The reporter had his own angle, and he printed an article in the December 28th issue of the LA Times. Swami says people are living on moon. And this is from the article. If astronauts land on the moon, they probably will be opposed by highly intelligent beings who have been there for 10,000 years. So, and Prabhupada did talk about that there are demigods living on the moon. It's a heavenly planet. So says Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta, spiritual leader of an attention-getting Indian cult that has grown from a few followers 2.5 years ago to groups of initiates in 10 U.S. and Canadian cities. The 72-year-old guru interviewed Friday at the Los Angeles Temple of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, 1975 La Cienega Boulevard. That's good that he gives the address. Believe there is only a remote chance that man could land on the moon planet. Claiming that his statements were based on Vedic literature, specifically the Srimad Bhagavatam, Swami Bhaktivedanta said present spacesuits would have to be improved. And this, another part of the article, matter of body. To land there, you must have the specific body, he said. With this body, you cannot go there. You have to change it scientifically, spiritually, or otherwise. Granting that an astronaut, that's in quotes, so apparently it's from Prabhupada. Granting that an astronaut's spacesuit might provide the right body, the Swami nevertheless maintained that the present spacesuits used by the astronauts are not adequate. The Bhagavad Gita, another holy Vedic book, describes lower, middle, and upper planetary systems, he said. The Earth is in the middle and has beings of average intelligence. The moon is in the upper category and contains higher intelligent beings, mainly because they've been living so many years. With this body, this is in quotes too, with this body, neither can you land there, nor can you interfere in their business, said the Swami. But if astronauts were successful in landing on the moon, he said, he expects the moon beings to oppose the earthlings. What? Citing an analogy in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he said, one king wanted to enter the heavenly kingdom and was opposed by the demigods. The Guru also indicated that any advanced civilization would not take kindly to dumb visitors from another planet. Dumb meaning stupid, not can't talk. They wouldn't take kindly to dumb visitors from another planet. Would astronauts or cosmonauts from Russia be able to see the moon beings? They would be almost invisible, he replied. That's in quotes too. Howard Wheeler, an Ohio State instructor of English and a disciple who sat in for the interview, helped the Swami here by suggesting that the moon beings might have subtle forms which would not be perceived by Earth residents. The Swami saw no difficulties arising in the Krishna consciousness movement if astronauts make a successful landing and return with nothing untoward happening. The movement, sometimes called the Hare Krishna movement, because of the importance of the chanting using the words Hare Krishna and Rama, has drawn its early growth from the recent interest in transcendental meditation. It's not a bad article. It gets a few things wrong. The Krishna consciousness didn't grow because of interest in the transcendental meditation. But all the talk of transcendental this and that at the time in hippie society, primarily hippie society, but not limited to, all the talk of that did help to spark some interest in the Krishna consciousness movement. But the spreading of Krishna consciousness doesn't depend on the mundane situation, the likes and dislikes of the day in the material realm. It's Lord Chaitanya's movement, and Krishna is infinitely attractive. Krishna will attract people in any time, place, or circumstances. As we see today, Krishna consciousness is growing and growing and growing all over the world. Weeks went by. No one was able to find a new temple. The meetings in the brahmachari apartment were confined, and the neighbors complained about the kirtan and the mridanga playing. But often, while the devotees were out chanting downtown, they would meet someone who would allow them to use his garage for an evening, thus providing an opportunity for all the devotees to be together with Prabhupada. This is from Srimati Dasi. Tamal Krishna met a woman on Sankirtan who offered her garage for Srila Prabhupada to lecture in. I'm sure it wasn't just the offer didn't come out of nowhere. Tamal Krishna is a very assertive and influential person. And when he spoke to someone, it's hard to say no to Tamal Krishna. Let's see. It was in a nice neighborhood with a clean double garage. We cleaned it even more. We put up madrasas on the wall, pictures over that, and a large altar on one side, and a vyasasan for Srila Prabhupada in the back. It was cold out. Cold for Los Angeles was probably maybe 50 or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It's cold for there. Let's see. We kept the large double doors closed so that we could heat the place and filled the air with incense, expecting Srila Prabhupada to arrive soon. Many neighbors and devotees filled the garage. Jai Gopal waited out front to give a blast on the conch shell as Srila Prabhupada arrived. We heard the conch shell and opened the garage door. As it raised from the bottom and swung slowly up to the ceiling, Srila Prabhupada stood there, small and dignified, waiting to enter. He walked in majestically, took his seat on the Vyasasan, and began a kirtan. That's a word that's used to describe Prabhupada very frequently by his disciples as majestic. He wasn't large, he was only 5 feet 5 inches tall, I think. Not large, but he had a very large presence and very majestic presence. And all the big young American men were bowing down, offering obeisances and worshiping him. So he definitely made an impressive entrance wherever he went. Let's see. He began a kirtan. His lecture struck the curiosity of many neighborhood guests. They all went home with magazines, prasadam, and a new experience to relate to their friends. Thus, Srila Prabhupada's preaching was going on. This is back to the narrative. One night, while speaking at a garage meeting, Prabhupada described explicitly Krishna's abode, where houses are made of chintamani stone and the trees are all desire trees. The inhabitants there, as well as the land and trees, all have spiritual forms and are full of bliss and knowledge. There, everyone serves Krishna, and Krishna reciprocates. On another night, Prabhupada spoke about the song Hari Hari Bifale by Narottam Das Thakur. In this song, Prabhupada explained the author is lamenting his disqualifications and is begging for Krishna's mercy. Narottam Das Thakur laments that instead of worshipping Radha and Krishna, he has simply wasted his life in sense gratification. Prabhupada would often speak about Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement of chanting the holy names as antidote for the ills of Kali Yuga. Of course, Narottam Das Thakur is not a fallen soul, but as usual, like with Bhaktivinoda Thakur and so many of our great acharyas, they always take the humble position and actually feel unqualified. They're not unqualified, but they feel unqualified. The devotee, and it's not an act, it's their feeling. The devotees always had questions. Madhudrisha asked how a brahmachari can channel his sex desire in serving Krishna. Vishnujana asked whether the spiritual master's mercy was the source of the bliss he was feeling. Tamal Krishna asked how Krishna could be both the father of everyone and the son of his devotee. And there were questions about what it was like to be a cow or tree in Krishnaloka, and whether the soul's rasa or serving relationship with Krishna could ever be changed. And Prabhupada would answer these questions at length. All these questions are answered in Prabhupada's books. But rarely would Prabhupada complain that there was no temple. Rather, he would say, "Never mind that we have no place, we have no temple. Krishna has provided this garage, so we accept it." Although homeless in Los Angeles, the devotee's basic ingredient for devotional life remained intact. It was not uncommon by Indian standards, Prabhupada explained, for one's living situation to be unsettled. In India, he said, as many as 20 people might keep their belongings in a single room. They would come and go, taking whatever they needed from the room while living outside, sleeping next to the road. But in America, of course, such a life was impossible, and garage meetings would attract few people. On November 28th, Prabhupada wrote in a letter, "So far as it goes in Los Angeles, everything is going very nicely with the Sankirtan party, and soon we are expected to have a new temple location." Should I stop now or should I keep going? All right. When Prabhupada met the devotees in the evening, he would ask them, "How many magazines did you distribute? How much money did you collect?" By their good results and Prabhupada's pleasure, a feeling of high spirits prevailed. But one night, when they came to visit him in his apartment, Prabhupada's mood was different. He seemed intolerant. A complacency had set in among the devotees. "How long do you expect me to sit in this house?" he demanded of Dayananda. And then he turned indignantly from one devotee to another. What are you doing? The deities are in my apartment, and you are all here. What are you doing?" He looked at Narayan. "What have you done today to find a temple?" Well, Prabhupada, I was... But without fully hearing Narayan's reply or excuse, Prabhupada turned to Tamal Krishna. "And you? Did you find a temple?" And one after another, he pinned down each devotee in the room. "And what did you do?" The devotees felt Prabhupada's anger. "I want a temple. Los Angeles must have a temple. There must be a place to worship the deity." That night he didn't lecture. 3 days later, the devotees found a new temple. A one-story church with 3 large rooms. The first really nice piece of property the International Society for Krishna Consciousness had ever acquired. That was before our temple. That was about a year before our temple, which was very nice. The church had been used by a Japanese Baptist congregation and was located on La Cienega Boulevard in the middle of Los Angeles, in a neighborhood of brick buildings, stores, factories, and businesses. The wooden church stood on a little patch of grass. The rent was high, $500 a month. That was a lot back then. For $500, they had a whole building. An old church, which was still in decent condition. More than $500 a month, more than Prabhupada had ever paid for a piece of property. Although Prabhupada had acted non-committal when the landlord had showed him the place, afterwards he told the devotees he wanted the place and they should get it. Dayananda questioned the high rent, but Prabhupada said they had waited long enough. Here was a good place, so they should get it. For Prabhupada, this new temple marked the beginning of a new era for the Krishna consciousness movement. He wrote Kirtanananda Swami on December 8th. You will be glad to know that we have signed a lease for the new temple for Los Angeles Center. It is a very large, fine chapel, and now there is a program being organized here to set up everything very nicely and invite many new people to participate in our program. Krishna has been very kind to grant us such facilities, and now there are many efforts to be made to use it nicely. The rent is very high, but if we can maintain this establishment, it will surely have great future prospects. Yeah, I'll stop there. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Good.